Have you ever walked past someone and, just by looking at them, assumed you knew their whole life story? Maybe you dismissed them as a nobody, someone unimportant. Well, what I am about to tell you will make you think twice before you ever judge anyone again. Picture this: America's most elite military base. We're talking Navy SEALs, Delta Force operators, the absolute cream of the crop. And they're all mocking an old man with a mop, laughing at him, making jokes, treating him like he's invisible. Until one day, they discover who he really is. Trust me, by the time this story is over, you will have goosebumps. Nobody ever gave the cleaner a second glance as he pushed his worn-out mop across the gleaming floors of Andrews Air Force Base's main training facility. His name badge, faded and frayed, simply read Walter. To most, he was just another retired nobody, part of the furniture, invisible unless you needed a spill cleaned up. Walter S. scruffy work boots and that old denim jacket over his grey t-shirt gave him this completely unremarkable vibe, like a man who'd worked hard his whole life, but whose important days were long behind him. Walter had shown up at Andrews exactly 3 years ago, after a quiet discharge from a life he never talked about. The official paperwork was brief: medical retirement, honorable service, nothing more. His pension was modest. He lived in a small flat in a working-class neighborhood, a 40-minute commute from the base. Every single morning at 5:15 sharp, rain or shine, Walter would shuffle into that gym before anyone else, doing his rounds with a methodical, quiet precision. The fluorescent lights would hum as he mopped the same floors, wiped the same mirrors, and topped up the same sanitizer dispensers. Day after day, year after year, working in the shadow of greatness. And this gym, it was the pride and joy of Andrews. It was the main facility where Navy SEALs ran their pre-deployment checks, where Delta Force operators kept their edge razor sharp between classified missions, where Army Rangers and Marine Force recon warriors tested themselves against impossible standards. The equipment was state-of-the-art: Olympic lifting platforms, treadmills that simulated high-altitude terrain, heavy bags hanging from reinforced ceilings, and pools for underwater combat drills. The walls were covered in photos of decorated servicemen, achievement plaques, and strength records that seemed almost superhuman. Every morning at 5:30, the first group would start to arrive. Young officers with crisp uniforms and even sharper attitudes, fresh recruits desperate to prove themselves, and among them was Lieutenant Commander Marcus Webb, recently promoted, highly decorated, and absolutely convinced he was God's gift to the military. Webb had arrived 6 months earlier, transferred from a cushy desk job in D.C. His credentials looked brilliant on paper, but he had zero real-world field experience. The gold bars on his collar were so shiny you could almost see your reflection in them. Webb's favorite pastime was making fun of the gym's invisible staff. "Careful there, old man," he'd said just last Tuesday, his words landing like deliberate punches. Don't go slipping on your own mop water. Wouldn't want you taking up a bed in the medical bay that belongs to someone who actually matters. His junior officers laughed right on cue, a perfect symphony of military brown-nosing. Another time, while Walter was refilling the water cooler, Webb announced, "Bet you never saw a day of proper combat." Probably served as a store's clerk or something equally distinguished. More laughter. The sergeant at the front desk, a guy named Thompson, who wasn't naturally cruel but was weak enough to follow the pack, even joined in. Walter here probably guarded a gym at some stateside base. That's the extent of his service. Even the privates, the youngest and least experienced, felt emboldened. "Oi, Walter, what's your story then? Did you sweep barracks or something?" one asked, his tone dripping with contempt. Another chimed in, "I bet you don't even know what half this equipment's for. See those kettlebells? Probably think they're fancy doorstops for a broom closet." Through all of this, Walter never responded with anger. He never defended himself. He would just nod, maybe offer a faint smile, and carry on with his work. His scarred knuckles, marked by a lifetime of experiences he kept hidden, gripped that mop handle with steady precision. His weathered face showed nothing. If the insults hurt, you'd never know it. That was the blessing and the curse of being invisible. People said whatever they wanted because they genuinely believed you didn't matter enough to be hurt. But Walter remembered everything. The names, the voices, the exact tone of their contempt. Not out of bitterness, but because memory was all that was left of his former life, the classified operations. The midnight insertions over hostile territory, the faces of the men he'd trained, the ones who had died under his command. Memory was where he kept them alive. 3 weeks before this particular Thursday, the base received a notification about a special evaluation, a joint assessment combining Navy SEALs, Army Delta Force, Marine Force Recon, and classified Air Force personnel. They were all gathering to prove their readiness for cosmic-level operations, the highest classification, eyes-only known by fewer than 200 people in the entire military. The gym had been buzzing with anticipation. The energy was electric, almost feverish, as elite operators ran drills with even greater intensity. Webb, sensing an opportunity to get noticed, had started positioning himself at the center of everything. He volunteered to oversee training rotations. He pushed his junior officers to move faster, work harder, prove themselves. He was performing, always performing, for an audience of people he believed controlled his future. That Thursday morning arrived cold and clear. Storm clouds threatened on the horizon, but inside the gym, it was bright and warm. By 8 o'clock, the place was packed, maybe 80 military personnel moving between stations with the presynchronized precision of a well-oiled machine. SEALs worked the Olympic platforms, their movements explosive and efficient. Delta operators cycled through the heavy bag stations, their strikes producing sharp cracks that echoed through the space. Officers circulated, making notes, evaluating, assessing. The director's office had even sent representatives to observe. Everyone was being watched. Walter moved through it all like a ghost, as he always did, cleaning around the edges, replacing towels, mopping the small spaces between stations. By mid-morning, the gym had reached capacity. Nearly 100 personnel now, with observers stationed at key points. The energy was intense, not hostile, but focused and tense in a way that only elite military units can generate. It was around 10:30 when things really kicked off. Webb, flanked by 2 of his subordinate officers and 3 SEAL team leaders, gathered near the main observation platform. The SEALs were running a complex evaluation simultaneous water training in the indoor pool, combined with an obstacle course and live fire assessment, the kind of operation that separates the truly elite from everyone else. Walter moved between the benches with his cleaning cart, collecting used towels, replacing water bottles. He was methodical, careful never to intrude. In his 3 years at Andrews, he'd developed an almost supernatural ability to move through chaos without disrupting it. One of the SEAL team leaders called out, "Towel," his voice carrying that casual command of someone used to being instantly obeyed. Walter appeared within seconds, fresh towels draped over his forearm, and handed them over without a word. Webb watched this exchange and smiled, that thin, predatory smile of someone who'd identified a target. He waited until Walter had moved a few paces away, then called out loud enough for everyone nearby to hear, "Oi, Walter, you've been hanging round this gym for what, 3 years now? Working here must be dead inspiring. Ever think about what you would have done if you'd actually served in the military? Maybe you could have been somebody." A ripple of uncomfortable laughter spread through the group. Some of the younger officers joined in, sensing they had permission. The SEAL team leaders exchanged glances. They were experienced enough to recognize this as the insecure behavior of a show-off, but young enough to be entertained by the spectacle. Walter just paused, turned, and carried on with his work. The moment passed, but Webb, emboldened by what he saw as a victory, pressed on. "Seriously though, old man, what did you do before this? Wash dishes somewhere? Guard a gate? Come on, we're all friends here. You can tell us your war stories." The laughter grew louder. Other officers drifted over, drawn by the promise of some free entertainment. The entire dynamic of the gym had shifted. This had become a public performance, and Webb had seized the stage. Master Chief Raymond, the senior enlisted SEAL advisor for the base, a man in his late 50s with the bearing of someone who'd seen it all, watched from across the gym. His expression didn't change, but something in his eyes darkened. He'd seen this pattern before. Young, ambitious officers climbing the ladder by stepping on the backs of others, never learning that true leadership means lifting people up, not tearing them down. The mockery continued for another 5 minutes, Webb, and his little gang kept the pressure on, asking innocent questions designed to humiliate. "Did you ever get promoted? See any proper combat? What was your specialty?" Each question was a little knife meant to wound.
Right? Let me ask you something. How many times have you walked past someone doing what you might consider a menial job and not given them a second thought? The cleaner in your office. The person stacking shelves at the supermarket. The guy sweeping the street. We see them, but do we really see them? This story is a powerful gut punch of a reminder that you never, ever know who you're dealing with. Imagine this. A high-stakes military readiness assessment. The air is electric. You've got SEALs, Delta Force operators, the absolute best of the best, all training at maximum intensity. In the middle of all this is a young, ambitious officer, Lieutenant Webb. He's got the look, the swagger, the polished boots. He sees himself as the future of leadership. And over in the corner, there's Walter, the quiet, older janitor, just mopping the floors, completely invisible to the high flyers around him. Webb and his buddies, they see Walter as a bit of a joke, a punchline. They make snide remarks, laughing at the old man just doing his job. Walter never reacts. He just keeps working, his face a mask of neutrality. He's heard it all before. He just keeps mopping. This is the scene, right? The peacock versus the ghost. Then, the dynamic shifts. The base director, a top brass brigadier general named Sarah Mitchell, walks in unannounced. Instantly, the energy in the gym cranks up to 11. Everyone straightens up, training harder, trying to catch her eye. This is a big deal. Webb, ever the opportunist, moves to the center of the gym, trying to look like he's running the whole show. He wants to be seen. He wants to be recognized. General Mitchell scans the room with the sharp, clinical eye of a commander evaluating her troops. Her gaze sweeps over the operators, over Webb, and then it lands on Walter. And she freezes, just for a microsecond, a flicker of an expression that only a trained observer would ever catch. But it's there. Shock. Recognition. She changes direction, leaving her aide scrambling, and walks directly toward the old janitor. The whole gym, buzzing with tension just a second ago, falls completely silent. You could hear a pin drop. The SEALs stop their drills. Everyone's eyes are locked on this bizarre interaction. The general, this figure of immense power, is walking towards the cleaner. "You," she says, her voice quiet but filled with genuine surprise. "Walter." Walter looks up from his mop, and something in his weathered face acknowledges her. It is a silent conversation between two people who know things the rest of the room couldn't even imagine. "I thought you'd retired," the director says, her voice now carrying across the silent gym. "I thought you'd left the service." Walter just nods slowly. Medical discharge, 10 years ago. And this is where the world turns upside down for everyone in that room, especially Lieutenant Webb. The general turns to address all the elite soldiers, and when she speaks, her words carry the weight of secrets, of history, of a reality they were completely blind to. She says, "What most of you do understand is that you're standing in the presence of someone who fundamentally shaped modern SEAL operations." Imagine the confusion on their faces. They're looking at Walter, the janitor, and hearing this, the general continues, "This man, Walter, spent 23 years training the most elite warriors this country has ever produced. He conducted operations. I'm not at liberty to discuss operations that altered the trajectory of global conflicts." Webb's face is draining of color. The smirks are gone, replaced by dawning horror. "He worked under an eyes-only designation during the Cold War," she says, her voice ringing with authority. "He orchestrated extraction operations in Vietnam that saved more than 40 Allied personnel from POW camps. His call sign was known in military circles not as a name, but as a guarantee of success. A promise that, if Shadow 9 was involved, the mission would succeed. Shadow 9. The name hangs in the air like a thunderclap. It's a legend. A ghost story whispered by seasoned operators. For the veterans in the room, the puzzle pieces are slamming into place. Master Chief Ryman, a grizzled warrior himself, stands utterly still, his face a mask of profound respect. This wasn't just a janitor. This was a founding father of their entire way of life. Webb, pale as a sheet, stammers, I didn't know, ma'am. Primera. Apologis. But the general isn't looking at him. Her focus is on Walter. Why didn't you tell anyone? Why work as a cleaner? And Walter's reply is the key to this whole story. Quietly, he says, because that life's finished. The men I trained are carrying the mission forward now. I served my time. Sometimes the greatest service is stepping aside and letting others shine. Total, crushing silence. The general looks at Walter with pure understanding. Then she turns back to the room, and her eyes find Webb. Let me be absolutely clear. This man has medals you don't have security clearance to know about. He's sacrificed more than most of you will ever comprehend. And you? She says, her voice cutting like glass. You mocked him because you couldn't see past his appearance. That's a failure of leadership. Webb. Remember it. What happened next changed that base forever. The laughter was replaced by reverence. The young operators who had mocked Walter now approached him, their voices filled with awe. Sir, is it true you trained Master Chief Donnelly? Did you really coordinate the extraction at Tora Bora? One young private, barely 19, came to him with tears in his eyes, just to apologize. And Walter, with the grace of a true leader, placed a hand on the young man's shoulder and said, You couldn't have known. And you're learning the most important lesson now. Never judge a warrior by their appearance. By the end of the day, Webb had requested a transfer. He couldn't face the shame of his own arrogance. Walter, meanwhile, finished his shift exactly as he always did. He mopped the floors, cleaned the mirrors, and put his tools away. But Ase left the young operators, the ones who had laughed at him hours before, stood at attention as he passed. Not a formal military salute. Something deeper, a gesture of pure, unadulterated respect. The most powerful people often don't need to announce themselves. They don't need shiny medals or fancy titles to validate their worth. True strength, true character, is quiet. It's humble. It's the dignity of a life lived in service to something bigger than oneself. Walter could have shut those young officers down with a single word, but he didn't have to. True greatness doesn't need to defend itself. So here's the challenge for all of us. The next time you walk past someone doing a job society might not value, take a second. Look them in the eye. Offer a smile, a thank you. Treat them with the respect that every single human being deserves. Because you just never know. You could be standing in the presence of a living legend, a quiet hero, a Shadow 9. If this story hit you the way it hit me, do me a favor and hit that like button, and share it with someone who needs this reminder. Make sure to subscribe for more stories that dig into what real strength and heroism look like. Drop a comment below and tell me what lesson from Walter's story hit you the hardest. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.